Former President Donald Trump is asking a Maine court to overturn the Secretary of State's decision to remove him from the primary ballot because of his role in the riot at the U.S. Capitol. The campaign filed a formal appeal today.
Maine Secretary of State Shannon Bellows removed Trump from the state's presidential primary ballot last Thursday. Bellows became the first election official to take action unilaterally to bar Trump under the insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment. Bellows did suspend the effect of her decision until the court rules on an appeal.